I'm sure if you know anything about Tokyo Mirage Sessions #FE, it's that it's essentially a more anime version of Fire Emblem and Shin Megami Tensei. And, well, you're not wrong, but I've seen a lot of people criticize this title unfairly for being weeb trash. Tokyo Mirage Sessions has a lot of the same tropes and cliches almost every anime always has, but I don't think that makes it irredeemably terrible. I mean, there are a few bits of the classic anime stuff that I can see people getting annoyed at. Not to spoil anything, but at one point Super Saiyan God, Super Saiyan Marth and crew start singing about Fire Emblem, which is admittedly very weird. The reason I'm telling you this is because if you're the type of person who hates anime garbage like this, which is fine, you will probably not enjoy Tokyo Mirage Sessions. By the way, I cannot say Tokyo Mirage Sessions for my life. I don't know why. Anyhow, if you can tolerate this kind of stuff or you like it, then I'm sure you'll find some enjoyment out of Tokyo Mirage Sessions #FE. Another point worth mentioning here is the game's history, which is necessary to understand to avoid any disappointment. See, initially, Tokyo Mirage Sessions #FE was not even called that. It was simply just called FEXSMT, indicating a crossover of the Fire Emblem and Shin Megami Tensei series. Over time, I guess the development team decided what they wanted to do with the game and it became what it is now. However, that doesn't mean it's what it was first marketed as. Technically, this is a crossover between those two series, but it plays more like a Shin Megami Tensei or a Persona game than a Fire Emblem one. If you come into this game expecting a lot of Fire Emblem aspects, you will be severely disappointed, as the only references to that franchise are characters and typing charts. Alright, so now that that's all done and squared away with, what do you say we dive into this game proper? Since I don't want to spoil the plot for you, I'm just going to give you a basic synopsis really quick. Essentially, the game kicks off with a girl watching a play when suddenly everyone in attendance, including her sister, mysteriously disappears. This girl, named Tsubasa, is traumatized by the event, so she decides to follow in her sister's footsteps and become a pop star. Along with her man friend, Itsuki, they venture to a talent show where Itsuki, who is the main protagonist, doesn't know about Tsubasa's desire to be a pop idol. Soon after, Tsubasa sneaks off to our audition to become an idol, and here's where the plot really begins. On the stage, the interviewer starts to ask Tsubasa really weird questions about her mental state, which at first really creeped me out. Not knowing what happens next, I legitimately felt uneasy about the guy, but that's precisely what the game wanted me to feel. Because the interviewer reveals himself in a really scary way as a mirage that wants to harvest pop idols' performa, which is a magical energy that enables people to follow their dreams. This was actually brilliantly and unexpectedly done. I didn't anticipate that the interviewer, who looked really jolly when you're introduced to him, would turn into a bad guy in the way he did. I thought the developers were going to set up more characters before introducing some conflict, so kudos to them for making things interesting. Anyways, the interviewer and his other Mirage allies abduct the pop idols and go back to their home, so Itsuki decides to pursue them in the hopes of rescuing Tsubasa. Once he arrives in this dome area where Tsubasa is being sucked of her performa, a mirage attacks him. But since Itsuki possesses some extra performa, he causes the mirage to revert back to his original form, being Chrom from Fire Emblem Awakening. Then Tsubasa does the same, and she meets Keita from Fire Emblem, Shadow Dragon, and the Blade of Light. However, the other mirages try to get the jump on the heroes, so Keita and Chrom fuse with Tsubasa and Itsuki respectively, which allows the youths to fight off the monsters. Because the two can form alliances with mirages, they're granted the title of Mirage Masters, and after murdering the interviewer guy and meeting another friend, they join the Fortuna Entertainment Agency and aid them in the fight against the mirages. Along the way, they come across a multitude of expressive characters like the ambitious and cocky Tama Agaki and the the fan service head of the agency, Maiko. The rest of the plot goes through the motions and is fairly enjoyable with its fair share of some minor twists. I didn't really expect to get invested in the plot of Tokyo Mirage Sessions, but in the end, I did. It's fascinating to see these dynamic characters go through arcs and change. A perfect example of this is Yashiro, but since he comes along a little later, I don't want to provide you with a too detailed explanation. Not to mention, the game is kinda funny at times. I mean, some of the funniest parts of this game weren't really meant to be funny, but they were, and I like that. There are other moments that do seem cliche, but I feel that comes with the jRPG and anime territory, so I can't really complain that much. At the end of the day, it's a generally lighthearted tale about anime teenagers and young adults fighting evil monsters. While the concept of the story is pretty good, I can't say the same about all of the writing. I'm sure a lot of my complaints can be chalked up to localization, but a lot of the dialogue, especially near the middle of the game, feels bland and boring. Usually characters have dull conversations that prevent me from really getting attached to them. It does the job, sure, but making these interactions more compelling would have been nice. Perhaps English voice acting would have been cool. Adding on top of this, I'm not a fan of how the game chooses to present a lot of the story. A lot of the time, the plot chooses to use the gamepad as its vehicle, which is kind of clunky and dumb. Instead of having characters act out their lines, they instead opted for characters to text each other to progress the story. Although you could argue this adds more depth to the narrative, it leaves something to be desired. Not only that, it feels lazy. Aside from the story being good, the presentation's also fantastic. I really love Tokyo Mirage Sessions' anime art style and abundant use of colors. The different colored people in the background really emphasize this strength, and while the environment isn't as diverse as something like Fire Emblem Fates, the cities do look nice. Cities are among my favorite settings in gaming, and I'm glad to say these Japanese ones are interesting enough to never get drab. Everything is well detailed too. All the characters, enemies, and attacks are diverse enough to spice up the experience. Visually, Tokyo Mirage Sessions is stellar. The same can roughly be said for its soundtrack, which I actually found myself liking. I don't really listen to a lot of Japanese music other than Snow Halation, but these tracks are pretty decent. Even if the Japanese lyrical pieces aren't for you, the atmospheric tunes serve as a nice break from them. Reincarnation, which I've used many a times in my videos, is probably my favorite, with the theme of the Mirage world coming in at a close second. But what about the gameplay? Well, it's quite honestly one of my favorite turn-based systems I've tried all year. The bulk of the gameplay rests in combating mirages, but a small chunk of it includes some mild exploration. Exploration is what you would expect from a big-budget Atlas RPG. You traverse labyrinths where there are oftentimes chests scattered around for you to find and open. Sometimes these chests require you to have to beat an enemy to get to them, but most of the time they take almost no effort to find. Even then, it was fun to walk around these dungeons, and since there's a wide variety of them, they never feel too tedious to get through. As far as the combat is concerned, it's your typical turn-based RPG with a few different aspects. To initiate a fight, you have to find a mirage floating around in the overworld, and if you strike it with your sword before it manages to attack you, you can have the first move. This edge you can get on the enemy is a great addition to keep the overworld engaging, because you never know when a mirage could sneak up on you, so you always have to be on your toes. The battle system is themed to be a performance, which, while not original, is something I always like to see. It makes the fighting visually intriguing, as it allows for more spectacle to take place. Attacking is flashy and standard, except that depending on what weapon you use, you'll have a different multiplier effect on the enemy, like in Fire Emblem. The same goes for the skill attacks, which are more powerful and use EP, but since they are more powerful, they're best to use to dispose of enemies quickly. Plus, if you're able to drain an enemy's health bar to red, teammates can come in and spectacularly finish off the baddie. These moments are really cool and satisfying to pull off, since it cements the fact that you're working with your party members as a team. Fighting in general is a lot of fun, and something that I surprisingly didn't get bored of. During my playthrough, I took took it slow and fought almost every monster I encountered because I was having a good time. Since I fought every enemy I came across, that also meant I didn't have to grind, and fighting bosses wasn't tough as heck. Never once did I feel bored by the combat. It ramps up the challenge halfway through too, which made me have to strategize my every move. From my past reviews, you'd probably expect me to hate the gameplay here, but I ended up finding it very entertaining. Overall, Tokyo Mirage Sessions #FE is a surprisingly great game. With its somewhat compelling story, phenomenal presentation, and relatively fun and fast-paced gameplay, this is one of the best JRPGs I've played in a long time. I would even go as far to say that this is the best JRPG on the Wii U. If you're a fan of the genre, I would highly recommend this title to you. And if the gameplay I've shown off in this video interests you, give the game a shot. Like I said before, it's not for everyone, but I believe you could find some enjoyment out of it if you tried it out. A lot of people have told me this game is brutal for newcomers, but I would have to disagree. I'm a newcomer to the Shin Megami Tensei series, and I never once felt overly frustrated by the combat. This game is $60, and it's well worth that price. You could probably find it for quite a bit cheaper too if you looked around. Thus, I would not advise you to wait for a price drop or sale. But as always, if you disagree or agree with me, let me know in the comment section below. Thank you so much for watching and take care. Have a wonderful day and goodbye.